If you watched my videos before on Ruby Amethyst, I mentioned how Flynn Rider really helps solve Ruby Amethyst's problem with aggro decks, primarily Emerald aggro decks. Well, I ran into a rare occurrence where I faced up against an Emerald Amethyst aggro evasive deck, which is normally something that would wipe the floor with Ruby Amethyst in past sets because your top end removal just wouldn't be fast enough to out their board before they're able to generate enough lore again to just close out the game with like Goats or Spellbook or something. But with the addition of Flynn Rider, like I've talked about in my deck profiles on Ruby Amethyst, you're going to see just how much work this card can put into the Emerald matchups. Now, I will say, against Emerald Steel, they will likely look at outing the Flynn Rider with something like a Let the Storm Rage on at the earliest opportunity, but you also have a lot of resiliency built into Ruby Amethyst now with this Flynn Rider, being able to both get a lot of lore against slower Sapphire decks as they ramp, and against the evasive decks, or in this case aggro evasive decks, or just aggro decks in general, you're going to be able to keep pace with their lore gain, which kind of offsets their whole strategy. So in this matchup here, we're going second, which normally would spell instant defeat for Ruby Amethyst against an aggro Emerald deck. But this opponent, smart, putting down the location that gives +1 strength and +1 toughness to their cursed merfolk, because now my Chernobog followers has to trade negatively into it. So this cursed merfolk gets tremendous advantage being on the play. They got 2 lore off of it. They got me to discard a card, and they outed my Chernobog followers from it. Very good trade for them, very bad for me. But again, I'm not too worried because I know against Emerald Amethyst, I'm like, I put this Flynn Rider down. What are they going to do against it? As soon as I drop a Maui, or in this case a Sisu Emboldened Warrior, they're going to be threatened to dump their hand very quickly, which makes it very susceptible to getting removed from onboard removal, such as these brawls I have in my hand. I'm going to ink one of them here. But I can manage the board state, reduce their hand, keep them on low cards, and if they want to have cards in their hand, this Sisu is going to gain me lore up the Flynn Rider until I get something higher up like Maui or a Madame Medusa or something. Now this location actually puts in a lot of work. It's going to basically mitigate the lore gain off of the Flynn Rider for a little while here, which is unfortunate. But the opponent is going to basically be forced to slow their game plan down. You can see them spending their ink instead of playing a character because they want to make sure that they have more strength on board than me to mitigate the lore gain off the Flynn Rider. So I'm fine playing a bit of a passive game. I'm keeping these brawls in hand for the inevitable Diablo that I'm pretty sure is going to come. And I opt to quest with the Sisu here because I'm like, if they want to trade out their Cheshire Cat into it, that's fine. I'm not too worried. Now, because they're playing the small Cheshire Cat, it's pretty obvious that they're likely going to be on the big Cheshire Cat, which, to be fair, doesn't seem like a bad option because it's a 5/6 body, which means it dodges all of the super popular strength-based removal, right? You're not really going to be able to remove it with a Brawl or a Madame Medusa, a small Sisu, etc. And it's very effective at just being an evasive character that's hard to out and being able to instantly banish cards. So and it's a 2-quester. So I do think the old Cheshire Cat is actually a half-decent card here. Regardless, though, we don't see it in this match, but the opponent opts to redrop a Pegasus, put it on the location. They're on 1 card in hand. They used their Mim Fox to have to trade out against my Sisu there, and there's not much that they can do. I think the Sisu still would have had enough strength even if they replayed the Pegasus first, so I don't think that mattered, but I could be wrong. Regardless, it didn't matter if their Madame Mim stayed on field or not, because we do get the Maui here, and the Maui with the Flynn Rider just represents too much for the opponent to overcome, because unless they have that the shift Cheshire Cat in order to crash into the Maui, I'm going to just have too much strength. This Ratigan is an interesting card. Being only on 1 toughness, you would think it gets outed easily, but because it has 4 strength, again, with Ruby being so popular with the Brawls and etc., I can't out this with my cards, right? I can't out it with the Medusa, with the Brawl, etc. So it's a 2-quester that's evasive, and unless you're on Steel, specifically with pinging removal, like that Ratigan is actually a pretty decent card. So normally, like I said, this deck would be giving Ruby Amethyst a lot of trouble. Clearly this deck was built to just aggro out against the Ruby decks, and it probably would be very effective at doing that. Here you see the Dawn Carnage come down, and yeah, there's just not much I can do to interact with the opponent's board here. But you can see me keeping pace with the lore gain because the Maui plus the Flynn Rider, I'm going to go up to 9 lore myself. We top deck the Be Prepared here, and I'm just like, oh, this is perfect, right? So I probably do a little bit of a telegraph play here that I probably shouldn't, because I'm like, yeah, I'm finally going to quest with this Flynn Rider, use the Maui to take out the Cheshire Cat. The opponent is going to be able to quest for 5 next turn, plus maybe develop another threat with whatever they draw. But this snake bouncing back rabbit also represents a draw, and I forget to ink here, but it's not too detrimental, because we are still going to be able to hit the 7 ink next turn, and we were likely not playing an interaction after the Be Prepared anyways. They top deck a Diablo, like what a top deck, that would normally be pretty good here, but at least it is not exerted, so it means they won't get the extra draw. Instead of challenging, they're just going to opt to quest out, and again, the Flynn Rider just keeps pace with the opponent's ability to quest, right? Like, I actually have more lore than you, and I'm doing way less questing, because Flynn Rider is the answer to aggro. So if you ever needed evidence, I don't know what better matchup I can show you other than this one. Like, literally, this is a match that Ruby Amethyst would have like no business winning, because we have almost no way to interact with the evasive cards. They're aggroing us on the play with very strong questing power emerald cards. They dropped the Dr. Facilia here, evasive, and I'm just like, holy cow. We top took a goat for the game, but we're going to look at the second match where we're on the draw, just to show you, again, how powerful this deck can be, I guess. So let's jump into the second match. Alright, so we're jumping into the second match here, and now the opponent knows what we're on, but we're going to be on the play. So we'll see if this makes any difference. My opening hand here gets a couple of Queen's Castle and a Be Prepared, so I'm going to put back the Queen's Castles, I think, because I want to hopefully draw into a Flynn Rider or just a better 2-drop card, hopefully next turn. But dropping the Chernobog Followers here in order to draw a card when I quest with it next turn will also help me accelerate, hopefully getting that 2-drop. So we're going to ink one Chernobog. You could argue I should ink the Minnie Mouse instead, but we're going to drop Chernobog's Followers and then pass. We'll see what the opponent wants to do here, if they have the Cursed Merfolk or not. The Brawl is likely going to be saved for the Diablo, and then the Madame Medusa will represent more Diablo removal later on. That's basically how you have to approach this match, for those of you wondering about the Emerald matchups. Basically, your Brawls, and I also tech in 2 copies of Teeth and Ambitions in this deck. Your Brawls are your early game removal for Diablos, and your Madame Medusas are basically your late game removals for the Diablos. We've seen the reduction of Ursula, Deceiver of Alls being used in these decks, and for that reason, it's you have less threats that you need to focus on with the Brawls and the Madame Medusas now, which is nice. But the Chernobog's Followers does come in clutch there and get us a Flynn Rider, so the opponent now probably has to shift gears into what their game plan wanted to be, maybe just continuously developing evasive threats. Now they have to put up a higher strength character on board, but we do have the Emboldened Warrior, the Sisu comboing with the Flynn Rider to represent a good amount of lore gain each turn, because like I mentioned many times in my deck profile and in my Ruby Amethyst videos, this combination of cards here makes it very hard for aggro decks to overcome, because they're not going to be able to dump their hand fast enough in the early game when you play out on curve, turn 2 Flynn Rider, turn 3 Sisu Emboldened Warrior, and therefore that Sisu is going to likely be the strongest character on board, unless the opposing player is on Ruby and can play out their own Sisu to maybe match your strength. Like these aggro decks that are not on Ruby, they're likely not going, especially when they're on the draw and they have that extra card, like they're not going to be able to put something on board that's going to outclass the Sisu here. So on 3, the opponent does drop the Diablo, but they have nothing that can rival the 5 strength the Sisu will have here. So we gain 3 lore, and look at that, we have more lore than the aggro player. Now again, we are on the play, so we do have the advantage in this game compared to the last game, but we save that Brawl as I mentioned for the Diablo here. And if the opponent has a second one, we're only 2 turns away from the Madame Medusa now, so you can kind of see the game plan of how Ruby is able to combat the Emerald decks if you tailor this deck correctly. Yes, the Steel version is a little bit more difficult because of the ability for them to sing songs to out like the Flynn Rider and stuff, but that really do depend on Diablo and stuff to draw cards, and if you're able to use things like the Brawl, like the Madame Medusa, to slow down their key points of interaction for card draw, the Emerald decks kind of just fall apart a little bit. So here the opponent does indeed have the second Diablo, which is unfortunate. They're going to quest that with the Pegasus, and then once again, the Sisu putting in that work with the Flynn Rider, going up to 7 lore. I'm actually outclassing the aggro player without questing at all. I'm going to go ahead and get my draws in now before this Diablo becomes exerted, because again, I do plan to play that Madame Medusa next turn. And what's nice about this interaction here is you still have the solid game plan of Ruby Amethyst, so I'm still able to play on curve, tempo control, still keep my hand fairly healthy. They're not on an aggressive discard build. But even if they play something like a Bruno, it's going to have way less value here because I have multiple cards in my hand, so they're not necessarily always going to be able to instantly out the threat that they want. They do end up shifting into the big Cheshire Cat, and this card is going to be a problem. I'm essentially in a race now, or trying to fish for a Be Prepared. So this evasive board by the opponent is actually pretty threatening. Despite me keeping pace with the lore, like, they can easily start clawing ahead with that Cheshire Cat since it quests for 2, especially if they have a Shift Pegasus on the following turn that they can establish as well. Thankfully, the Bruno does not discard the Madame Medusa, because if it did, I definitely would have been in a way worse spot. But with the double Flynn Riders, thankfully, they're only able to take out 1. So we're going to be able to ink the Sisu there and then drop the Madame Medusa to throw off the card draw off of the Diablo there. And then once again, like, Emerald is really limited in their options. Now this big Cheshire Cat is offsetting the lore gain off of this Flynn Rider. Like I said, a 5/6 body is like a perfect stat line for this meta right now. So this is a very interesting deck. I'm curious to maybe try something similar. I was always a big fan of that Cheshire Cat. But here you can see the opponent is going pretty much, all in here, developing 3 double questers. So that's 6 lore on board next turn that I have to deal with. Unfortunately, I have nothing to out the board. Like, my Maui doesn't do anything here. I can't interact with that Curse Merfolk because I don't have a Brawl or a Teeth and Ambitions or anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop the Maui, which has 1 more strength than the Cheshire Cat. And you can argue that I shouldn't have quested there with my Flynn Rider, because this does represent 6 lore next turn. And then if they can't out, well, they'd have to out the Medusa or the Rabbit, because then I would just quest for game next turn if my Flynn Riders were readied up and they couldn't remove them from the field. So the opponent gets a 3rd Diablo, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, okay. But at this point, I'm feeling okay, because the Maui will hopefully take out the Curse Merfolk. Hopefully whatever I draw is a card that I can either ink or just play out with the goat, and so I have nothing in my hand, take out the Curse Merfolk. Then the opponent only has 5 questing power on board, and even if they quest, they had to take out the Flynn Rider there with the Pegasus, so they're only on 11. They might quest to 13, which, they probably do, because there's no point in challenging anything on this board, really. I mean, I guess they could challenge the Medusa, but I think at this point they're better off trying to race, because if they go to 13, they basically win the game next turn if I don't out anything on their board, but obviously my Maui will have to crash into the Curse Merfolk regardless. So unfortunately, we draw King Undisputed, and I think for a long time here for some reason, because I'm like, is there a way I can get double value here? But no way I work it, I think, from what I was thinking. I don't know if my brain was working properly or not, but I think regardless whether I sing the King Undisputed, because I can't hard cast it unless I ink the goat, and I don't want to do that. It's inconsequential whether I sing it or just let it get discarded off the challenge on the Maui. Like, it's the same thing. And I figured, like, if I sing the King Undisputed, I don't know, maybe there's a chance that they banish the Diablo. They quest for 6. No, because I would still take out. Yeah, if I sing the King Undisputed with, like, Maui, and then I don't take out the Curse Merfolk, they could quest up to 19. If they top deck a goat, they win the game. So I'd have to take out the Curse Merfolk either way. So if I sing King Undisputed, either they just banish their Curse Merfolk anyways, or they banish the Diablo, and it doesn't matter, right? So I'm just like, whatever. I'm just gonna end up throwing the Maui into the Curse Merfolk. Yeah, I'm trying to work. I'm like, is there a way that there's no way I can, like, sing this, because they probably just banish the Curse Merfolk anyways, because then I'd have to take out the Curse Merfolk. So whether I sing it or challenge the Curse Merfolk is like the same thing. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm wasting a lot of time here, but I basically have game on board by just leaving this Flynn Rider in a readied state, because this Maui essentially just wins me the game next turn. So I'm going to end up crashing and taking out or discarding the King Undisputed. The opponent could crash their Cheshire Cat into the Maui, but then they lose their Cheshire Cat, and I still have the higher strength characters on board in the Goat and the Madame Medusa. And between the Pegasus and the Diablo and whatever they top deck, if they don't have anything 4 strength or more, like that Ratigan, they would just lose the game. So that's a GG. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, not necessarily a standard matchup, but a good showcase of what Flynn Rider can do against aggro matches when you use it the right way. and really improves that matchup for Ruby Amethyst. So on screen here is the deck list, linked in the description, and likely pinned in the comments is a link to the deck list as well, the updated deck list with the 2 copies of Teeth and Ambitions. And you can see, like, there's a lot of answers that we have for that Diablo, because we all recognize that it's a problem. And yeah, we'll see if, you know, it still remains meta after all of the counterplay that people are taking in against it because of how strong it is. But that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this video. If you made it this far, thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.